The Manhattan family court buzzed with its usual morning activity as Sarah Mitchell walked through the metal detectors, her designer handbag getting a thorough check from security. At 32 years old, Sarah carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her business suit spoke of the kind of money she was used to having. It was 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and Sarah had been waiting for this day for months. In her leather folder, she carried what she believed was ironclad evidence that Marcus Thompson was the father of her 2-year-old daughter, Emma. The thought of finally getting the child support she felt she deserved made her smile as she checked her reflection in her compact mirror one last time before heading to courtroom 4B. The courthouse corridors were filled with other people waiting for their cases to be called. Some looked nervous, others resigned, but Sarah's face showed only determination. She had carefully planned this moment, choosing to file her case in Manhattan, where child support payments were known to be among the highest in the country. Sarah's attorney, James Cooper, was already waiting outside the courtroom. He was a seasoned family court lawyer who had handled hundreds of child support cases, but something about this one made him uneasy. Maybe it was the way Sarah had dismissed his questions about the exact circumstances of Emma's conception, or perhaps it was her obsession with Marcus Thompson's financial status. "Are you ready?" James asked, adjusting his tie. Sarah nodded confidently, pulling out a photo of little Emma from her folder. The toddler was adorable with her curly brown hair and big brown eyes, features that Sarah claimed came from Marcus. Inside the courtroom, Sarah took her seat at the plaintiff's table, arranging her documents just so. Her heart skipped a beat when the door opened and Marcus Thompson walked in with his attorney. At 40 years old, Marcus was an impressive figure in his navy-dressed uniform. His dark skin contrasted sharply with the crisp white of his collar, and his military bearing commanded attention from everyone in the room. Marcus's face was a mask of confusion as he glanced at Sarah. He whispered something to his attorney, shaking his head in what appeared to be genuine bewilderment. Sarah noticed this but dismissed it as an act. After all, she had spent months building her case, gathering information about Marcus's successful military career, his current position as a military contractor, and most importantly, his substantial income. "All rise," the bailiff called out as Judge Patricia Henderson entered the courtroom. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, took her seat and began reviewing the case file before her. Case number 2025-4789, Mitchell versus Thompson, the court clerk announced. This is a petition for child support for minor child Emma Mitchell, age 2 years and 3 months. Judge Henderson looked up from her papers, her experienced eyes taking in both parties. "Ms. Mitchell, you claim that Mr. Thompson is the father of your child and are seeking child support. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Sarah replied confidently, her voice clear and steady. The judge turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, you deny being the father of Ms. Mitchell's child." Marcus stood, his posture perfectly straight. "Yes, Your Honor. I've never met this woman before in my life. The first time I heard her name was when I received the court summons." Sarah's attorney quickly interjected. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson was present at the Blue Moon Lounge on the night of May 15, 2022, where he met my client. We have credit card receipts confirming his presence." Marcus's attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Rachel Martinez, stood up. "Your Honor, we have documentation showing that my client was deployed overseas during the entire month of May 2022. It would have been impossible for him to be at that lounge." Judge Henderson raised her hand to silence both attorneys. The tension in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah's confident smile began to falter slightly as she watched the judge scrutinize the documents before her. "This is quite a serious matter," Judge Henderson said, looking directly at Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, are you absolutely certain that Mr. Thompson is the father of your child?" Sarah's voice didn't waver as she answered, "Yes, Your Honor, I am 100% certain." The judge nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Given the conflicting information presented, I'm ordering a DNA test. We'll reconvene once the results are available." As the judge's gavel came down, Sarah's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. This was just the beginning, and she had no idea that her carefully constructed plan was about to unravel in ways she never could have imagined. 2 weeks later, the preliminary hearing continued. The courtroom felt even more tense than before as Sarah sat rigidly in her chair, watching Marcus's attorney present evidence to the judge. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. "Your Honor," Rachel Martinez said, standing with a thick folder in her hands, "I have here Commander Thompson's complete military service record for the past 3 years. As you can see, he was stationed aboard the U.S. Gerald R. Ford from March 2022 to August 2022, making it physically impossible for him to have been at the Blue Moon Lounge in May 2022. Sarah's attorney quickly rose to his feet. "Your Honor, my client distinctly remembers meeting Mr. Thompson at that lounge. She even has a photograph from that evening." Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a slightly blurred photo that showed a man who looked like Marcus sitting at a bar. The judge examined the photograph carefully before passing it to Marcus and his attorney. Marcus studied the photo, his forehead creasing with confusion. He whispered something to his attorney, who nodded and addressed the court. "Your Honor, this photograph is too blurry to definitively identify anyone. Furthermore, we have ship logs, official Navy documentation, and even photographs of Commander Thompson performing his duties aboard the aircraft carrier during the time in question." Judge Henderson reviewed the military documents carefully. "These appear to be in order, Ms. Mitchell. How do you explain this discrepancy?" Sarah's confidence wavered slightly, but she maintained her composure. "You must have taken leave, Your Honor. I know what I remember. We spent the entire evening together, and Emma is the result of that night." Marcus stood up, his voice firm but controlled. "Your Honor, I respect this court and Ms. Mitchell's right to seek support for her child, but I cannot remain silent. I have never met this woman. I was serving my country thousands of miles away when she claims we met. I have dedicated my life to the Navy, and my service record speaks for itself." The judge turned to Sarah's attorney. "Mr. Cooper, do you have any evidence beyond your client's testimony and this unclear photograph?" James Cooper shuffled through his papers nervously. "We have credit card receipts from the Blue Moon Lounge showing a Marcus Thompson was there that night, Your Honor." Rachel Martinez quickly interjected. "Your Honor, if I may? There are over 50 people named Marcus Thompson in the greater New York area alone. A credit card receipt with that name proves nothing." Judge Henderson removed her glasses and looked directly at Sarah. "Ms. Mitchell, making false claims in this court is a serious offense. Are you absolutely certain about your identification of Commander Thompson?" Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. "Yes, Your Honor. I would never bring this case if I wasn't completely sure. Emma needs support from her father, and Marcus Thompson is her father." The judge's expression hardened. "Well, there's one way to resolve this matter definitively. I'm ordering an immediate DNA test. Ms. Mitchell, you will make Emma available for testing tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at the court-appointed facility. Commander Thompson, you will provide a DNA sample at the same time." For the first time since the proceedings began, Sarah's perfectly composed facade cracked slightly. "Your Honor, tomorrow morning isn't possible. Emma has a doctor's appointment, and I need to give advance notice to her daycare." "The doctor's appointment can be rescheduled," Judge Henderson said firmly. "This court has been patient, but given the serious nature of these allegations and the compelling evidence of Commander Thompson's absence during the time in question, we need to resolve this matter quickly." Marcus sat quietly, his military training evident in his calm demeanor despite the serious allegations against him. His attorney looked satisfied with the judge's decision, while Sarah's attorney appeared increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "If either party fails to appear for the DNA test tomorrow," the judge continued, "this court will draw its own conclusions. Do I make myself clear?" Both parties nodded, though Sarah's movement was noticeably hesitant. As the judge adjourned the hearing, Sarah rushed out of the courtroom, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Marcus remained seated, speaking quietly with his attorney. Neither of them could have predicted the shocking truth that the DNA test would reveal, a truth that would change not just their lives, but someone else's as well. The courthouse corridors echoed with Sarah's hurried footsteps as she left, her mind racing with thoughts that no one else could read, and fears she dared not speak aloud. The next morning dawned gray and rainy in Manhattan. The testing facility's waiting room was quiet except for the soft ticking of a wall clock showing 8:55 a.m. Marcus Thompson had arrived 15 minutes early, sitting patiently in a chair while reading through some paperwork his attorney had given him. At 9:15 a.m., the facility director approached Marcus. "Sir, we haven't heard from Ms. Mitchell yet. Would you like some coffee while you wait?" Marcus politely declined, checking his phone for any messages. His attorney, Rachel Martinez, had already called the courthouse to report Sarah's absence. The testing facility's staff continued their morning routine, occasionally glancing at the door, but Sarah and little Emma didn't appear. By 10 o'clock a.m., Judge Henderson had called an emergency hearing. The courtroom was tense as Marcus and his attorney took their seats. The judge's expression was stern as she entered, clearly displeased by the morning's events. "Where is Miss Mitchell?" Judge Henderson demanded, looking at James Cooper, who appeared increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Cooper began, tugging at his collar, "I received a text message from my client about an hour ago. She claims Emma developed a high fever overnight and had to be taken to the emergency room." Rachel Martinez stood immediately. "Your Honor, we've contacted all major hospitals in Manhattan and the surrounding boroughs. There are no records of Emma Mitchell being admitted last night or this morning." The judge's face darkened. "Mr. Cooper, get your client on the phone. Now." James Cooper dialed Sarah's number repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail. The judge waited, her patience visibly wearing thin. "Your Honor," Cooper said finally, "I cannot reach my client. However, I must inform the court that I have serious concerns about continuing to represent Ms. Mitchell in this matter." Just then, the courtroom doors burst open. Sarah Mitchell walked in, but notably without Emma. Her usual polish was missing, her hair was messy, her makeup hastily applied, and she clutched her designer bag like a shield. "Miss Mitchell," Judge Henderson's voice was arctic, "where is your daughter?" Sarah's voice trembled as she spoke. "Your Honor, I can explain. Emma's not feeling well, and I left her with my mother. I can bring her another day for the test." "That's interesting," Rachel Martinez interjected, "considering you testified last month that both your parents passed away 5 years ago." The color drained from Sarah's face. The judge shuffled through her papers, finding Sarah's previous testimony. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Henderson's voice was dangerously quiet, "would you like to revise your statement?" Sarah's composure cracked entirely. She sank into her chair, her designer bag sliding to the floor. I need more time, Your Honor. Just a little more time." "Time for what, Ms. Mitchell?" "Time to continue this apparent deception of the court." The judge leaned forward. "You have exactly 1 minute to explain yourself before I hold you in contempt." Sarah's eyes darted around the courtroom like a trapped animal. Marcus watched her with a mixture of confusion and concern, his military training making him alert to her strange behavior. I know Marcus is Emma's father," Sarah insisted, but her voice lacked its previous confidence. "I just need a few more days to organize everything for the test." Judge Henderson had heard enough. "Ms. Mitchell, your behavior suggests otherwise. This court orders you to produce Emma for DNA testing by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. If you fail to comply, I will issue a warrant for your arrest for contempt of court, and I will refer this matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential perjury charges." Sarah's face went completely white. She grabbed her bag and practically ran from the courtroom, ignoring her attorney's calls to wait. James Cooper stood, addressing the judge. "Your Honor, I respectfully request to withdraw as counsel for Ms. Mitchell. I believe she has not been truthful with me about the fundamental facts of this case." The judge granted his request immediately. As the courtroom cleared, Marcus remained seated, a thoughtful expression on his face. Something about Sarah's behavior bothered him, not just her obvious attempts to avoid the DNA test, but something else he couldn't quite put his finger on. Little did anyone know, Sarah's desperate attempt to avoid the DNA test wasn't just about protecting herself from perjury charges. She was protecting a secret that would shock everyone in the courthouse. A secret that involved not just Marcus, but someone very close to him. The next morning, the courthouse security cameras captured Sarah Mitchell entering the building at 8:45 a.m. This time, she wasn't alone. She held the hand of a small girl with curly brown hair and big brown eyes. Emma. The child looked around curiously, clutching a worn teddy bear. The DNA testing facility was on the 3rd floor. Sarah's hands shook as she pressed the elevator button. Emma looked up at her mother, sensing her nervousness. "Mommy, are you scared?" Sarah forced a smile. "No, baby. Everything's going to be fine." But her voice quivered, betraying her words. When they arrived at the facility, Marcus was already there with his attorney. He stood when they entered, and for the first time, got a good look at Emma. Something flickered across his face, a moment of recognition that made Sarah's heart stop. The facility director, Dr. Chen, approached them with a warm smile, particularly directed at Emma. "Hello, everyone. We'll make this as quick and comfortable as possible. It's just a simple cheek swab." Judge Henderson had also arrived to oversee the proceedings, given the previous day's events. She watched Sarah carefully, noting how the woman's hands wouldn't stop trembling. "Ms. Mitchell," the judge said, "since you're here without legal representation, I want to remind you that providing false testimony or attempting to tamper with a DNA test are serious crimes carrying significant penalties." Sarah nodded mutely, her face pale. Emma, innocent to the tension around her, was happily chatting with Dr. Chen about her teddy bear. The testing process began with Marcus. He sat calmly as Dr. Chen swabbed the inside of his cheek. Then it was Emma's turn. The little girl was brave, giggling when the swab tickled her cheek. "Now we'll process these samples," Dr. Chen explained. "Given the court order, we're expediting the results. They should be ready in about an hour." That hour felt like an eternity. Sarah paced the waiting room, checking her phone constantly. Marcus sat quietly, watching Emma play with some toys in the corner. The more he watched her, the more his expression changed from confusion to deep thought. Finally, Dr. Chen returned with an envelope. Judge Henderson had everyone return to her courtroom for the results. The courtroom was silent as Dr. Chen opened the envelope. Sarah gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Marcus sat straight, his military bearing evident even in this tense moment. Dr. Chen cleared his throat. "Your Honor, the DNA test shows." He paused, double-checking the results, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "This is rather unusual." "Continue, Doctor," Judge Henderson urged. "The results show a very close genetic match between the child and Mr. Thompson, not a father-child match. The genetic similarity is more consistent with—" Dr. Chen looked up, "an uncle-niece relationship." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Marcus stood up suddenly, his face showing shock and then dawning realization. "Michael," he whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Sarah burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. Judge Henderson banged her gavel for order. "Would someone like to explain what's going on here?" Marcus turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I have an identical twin brother named Michael. We haven't spoken in 3 years, since he left New York after." He turned to Sarah, understanding finally reaching his eyes. You knew all along it was Michael, didn't you?" Sarah couldn't speak through her tears, but her silence was answer enough. "Your Honor," Marcus's attorney spoke up. "It appears Ms. Mitchell deliberately targeted my client, knowing he was more financially successful than his twin brother, the actual father of her child." Judge Henderson's face showed a mix of anger and disbelief. "Miss Mitchell, is this true?" Sarah finally looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. I just wanted what was best for Emma. Michael disappeared 3 years ago. He never knew I was pregnant. Marcus has a good job, a stable life." "So you committed fraud," Judge Henderson finished for her. "You attempted to deceive this court and force an innocent man to pay child support for his niece." Emma, still playing in the corner, remained blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around her. Marcus looked at his niece with new eyes, seeing his brother's features in her face. But the biggest shock was yet to come, because Michael Thompson wasn't as gone as everyone thought, and the truth about his disappearance would change everything. The courtroom was still reeling from the DNA test revelation when the heavy doors swung open. Everyone turned to see a man standing in the doorway, a man who looked exactly like Marcus Thompson. Michael Thompson had finally returned. Sarah's face went white as if she'd seen a ghost. Emma, who had been coloring quietly in the corner, looked up at the newcomer with curious eyes. The resemblance between the twins was uncanny, both tall, well-built, with the same dark skin and strong features. But while Marcus wore his Navy uniform, Michael was dressed in civilian clothes, looking slightly worn from travel. "I believe I'm just in time," Michael said, his voice heavy with emotion. You walked into the courtroom, his eyes fixed on Emma. Judge Henderson recovered first from the shock. And you are? Michael Thompson, Your Honor. Marcus's twin brother, and he glanced at Emma, then at Sarah, apparently, a father who never knew he had a daughter. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking. How did you know to come here? Michael pulled out his phone. I got a call from an old friend who works at the courthouse. They recognized my brother and heard about the DNA test results. I was in Seattle, but I caught the first flight out. Marcus approached his brother, and for a moment, everyone held their breath. The twins hadn't spoken in 3 years, and the tension was palpable. But then Marcus extended his hand, and Michael pulled him into a tight hug. I'm sorry, brother, Michael whispered. For everything. Judge Henderson cleared her throat. Mr. Thompson, Michael Thompson, while this reunion is touching, we're in the middle of a serious legal matter. Ms. Mitchell has attempted to fraudulently obtain child support from your brother. Michael turned to Sarah, his expression a mix of hurt and anger. Why, Sarah? Why didn't you tell me about Emma? Sarah collapsed back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. You disappeared. Right after that night at the Blue Moon Lounge, you vanished. No calls, no messages. I tried to find you for months. I had to leave, Michael explained, his voice tight. I was working undercover for the Seattle Police Department on a major drug trafficking case. I couldn't contact anyone, not even Marcus. My whole family had to think I just abandoned them to maintain my cover. The courtroom fell silent as the truth unfolded. Emma, sensing the emotional atmosphere, got up from her coloring and walked over to Michael. She looked up at him with innocent curiosity. You look like the man in Mommy's picture, she said simply. Michael knelt down to Emma's level, tears forming in his eyes. Hi, Emma. I'm your daddy. Judge Henderson watched the scene unfold, then spoke firmly. Ms. Mitchell, while Mr. Michael Thompson's appearance provides context, it doesn't excuse your actions. You deliberately attempted to defraud this court and Commander Marcus Thompson. Sarah nodded, defeated. I know, Your Honor. I was desperate. When I couldn't find Michael, and I saw how successful Marcus was, I convinced myself it was the right thing to do for Emma. The right thing? Marcus stepped forward. You were willing to destroy my career, my reputation, all for money? Michael stood up, still holding Emma's hand. Your Honor, I know Sarah was wrong, but please consider that she was trying to provide for our daughter. I take some responsibility for this situation. If I had found a way to let her know I was working undercover. The judge held up her hand. The emotional complexities of this situation don't negate the legal implications. Ms. Mitchell, you will face charges for attempted fraud and perjury. Mr. Michael Thompson, you may file for paternity and custody rights if you wish. Emma looked between all the adults, confusion clear on her little face. Michael picked her up gently, and she didn't resist, somehow sensing the connection between them. I've missed 3 years of my daughter's life, Michael said, his voice breaking. I don't want to miss another day. As the courtroom began to clear, the two brothers stood side by side, looking at the little girl who had unknowingly brought them back together. But while one chapter of the story was closing, another was just beginning. The question of custody, Sarah's legal troubles, and the rebuilding of family bonds would bring even more surprises. 1 week after Michael's dramatic courthouse appearance, the Thompson family gathered in Marcus's spacious Manhattan apartment. The brothers sat across from each other at the kitchen table, coffee cups between them, while Emma played with her toys in the living room. Sarah was meeting with her new criminal defense attorney, facing the consequences of her actions. I still can't believe you were undercover all this time, Marcus said, watching his brother. 3 years, Mike. We thought you'd just given up on life. Michael ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture identical to his twins. The case was huge. International drug ring, corrupt officials. I couldn't risk anyone's safety by breaking cover. But I never thought. He glanced at Emma. I never imagined I'd miss the beginning of my daughter's life. The sound of Emma's laughter filled the apartment as she played with her teddy bear. The little girl had adjusted surprisingly well to the sudden appearance of her father and uncle, accepting their identical faces with the simple logic of a child. She has your smile, Marcus observed. I should have seen it sooner. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. It was Rachel Martinez, Marcus's attorney, carrying a thick folder of documents. "Gentlemen," she greeted them, taking a seat at the table, "we need to discuss the custody situation. The DA's office is moving forward with charges against Sarah. Given the circumstances, they're offering her a plea deal, but she's still looking at potential jail time." Michael's face tightened with concern. What happens to Emma if Sarah goes to jail? Rachel opened her folder. "That's why I'm here. Sarah's agreed to give you full custody, Michael. She knows she's facing serious consequences and wants to ensure Emma's taken care of." The brothers exchanged looks. Despite Sarah's deception, they both knew she loved Emma deeply. "I've already filed the paperwork for a paternity test," Rachel continued, "though it's just a formality given the DNA results from last week. Once that's complete, we can proceed with the custody arrangement." Emma wandered into the kitchen, climbing onto Michael's lap as if she'd known him her whole life. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Michael hugged her close, still amazed by how quickly she'd accepted him. "Soon, sweetheart. Uncle Marcus might want to come too." Marcus smiled at his niece, but his expression turned serious as he addressed Rachel. "What about Sarah's charges? Is there any way to help reduce her sentence? For Emma's sake." Rachel shuffled through her papers. "The fraud charges are serious, but her cooperation and immediate admission of guilt after Michael's appearance work in her favor. The judge might consider a suspended sentence with probation, especially given the unique circumstances." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll testify on her behalf. Yes, what she did was wrong, but if I hadn't disappeared..." He hugged Emma tighter. "We all made mistakes here." Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah's attorney. "Sarah's agreed to the plea deal," he announced. 2 years probation, mandatory counseling, and she has to pay back all the court costs. "And custody?" Michael asked anxiously. "Joint custody," Marcus read from the message. "You'll have primary physical custody, Michael, with Sarah getting supervised visitation until she completes her counseling program." Emma looked up at her father, seeming to sense the importance of the moment. "Is Mommy coming to see me?" Michael kissed the top of her head. "Yes, Princess. Mommy will still see you. We're just going to have a different kind of family now." Rachel began organizing the custody paperwork. "Michael, you'll need to find a permanent residence in New York. The court will want to see stability." "He can stay with me," Marcus offered immediately. "I have plenty of space, and it would give Emma a chance to bond with both of us." Michael looked at his brother gratefully. After 3 years of separation, the twins were rebuilding their relationship, brought together by the little girl who shared their DNA. As Rachel left with the signed papers, Emma fell asleep in Michael's arms, clutching her teddy bear. The brothers sat in comfortable silence, watching her sleep. "You know," Marcus said quietly, "in a strange way, Sarah's scheme brought our family back together." Michael nodded, gently stroking Emma's curls. Sometimes the worst decisions lead to the best outcomes, but both brothers knew the story wasn't over yet. Sarah's upcoming court appearance, the custody arrangements, and the challenges of building a new kind of family lay ahead of them. 2 months after the DNA test revelation, everyone gathered in Judge Henderson's courtroom for Sarah's sentencing hearing. The atmosphere was solemn as Sarah stood before the judge. Dressed simply in a gray suit, her previous flashy style notably absent. Michael sat in the front row with Emma beside him, while Marcus sat on Emma's other side. The little girl had grown comfortable with her new family arrangement over the past weeks, splitting time between her father's home and supervised visits with her mother. "Ms. Mitchell," Judge Henderson began, reviewing the papers before her, "you've pleaded guilty to attempted fraud and providing false testimony to this court. Before I pronounce sentence, is there anything you'd like to say?" Sarah turned to face the courtroom, her hands trembling slightly. "Your Honor, I know what I did was wrong. When Michael disappeared, I was scared and alone. Finding out I was pregnant, I panicked. Seeing Marcus's success while I struggled to make ends meet, I convinced myself that my lie was justified." She paused, wiping away tears. "But I know now that I was wrong. I've hurt everyone involved, especially my daughter." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Thompson, Michael Thompson, you've submitted a letter to the court regarding the defendant's sentence. Would you like to address the court?" Michael stood, glancing at Emma before speaking. "Your Honor, what Sarah did was wrong, but I share some responsibility. My undercover assignment meant I wasn't there when she needed me. Emma needs both her parents, and I believe Sarah has learned from her mistakes. Judge Henderson turned to Marcus. Commander Thompson, as the victim of Ms. Mitchell's attempted fraud, would you like to make a statement? Marcus stood, his military bearing evident. Your Honor, while I can't condone Sarah's actions, I support my brother's position. My niece deserves to have her mother in her life. The judge reviewed the plea agreement one final time before speaking. Ms. Mitchell, your actions were calculated and could have had severe consequences for Commander Thompson. However, I've taken into account your immediate admission of guilt after Michael Thompson's return, your cooperation with authorities, and the unique circumstances of this case. Sarah held her breath as Judge Henderson continued. I hereby sentence you to 2 years of probation with the following conditions. You must complete 200 hours of community service, attend weekly counseling sessions, and pay restitution for all court costs. You will continue to have supervised visitation with Emma, with the possibility of reviewing the supervision requirement after 1 year of successful counseling. Relief washed over Sarah's face. She wouldn't be going to jail. However, the judge added sternly, any violation of your probation will result in immediate jail time. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Sarah replied softly. Thank you. After the hearing, the group gathered outside the courthouse. Emma ran to her mother, who knelt to embrace her daughter. Mommy, are you coming to my ballet recital next week? Emma asked hopefully. Sarah looked questioningly at Michael, who nodded. Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it. Marcus watched the scene with a mix of emotions. Sarah, he called out, causing her to look up nervously. Emma's birthday is next month. We're having a family celebration at my apartment. You should come. Sarah's eyes filled with tears at this unexpected olive branch. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. Michael put his arm around his brother's shoulders. Family's complicated, he said, but we're figuring it out. As they prepared to leave, Emma's voice piped up. Daddy, Uncle Marcus, can we get ice cream? The twins laughed simultaneously, a sound so identical it made Emma giggle. I think we've all earned some ice cream, Michael said, scooping up his daughter. Sarah watched them walk away, her heart heavy but hopeful. She had a long road ahead. Counseling sessions, rebuilding trust, learning to co-parent with Michael. But for the first time since this all began, she felt like things might actually work out. Judge Henderson, watching from her courthouse window, smiled slightly. In her decades on the bench, she'd seen countless family dramas unfold, but this one was unique. A fraud attempt had inadvertently reunited a family, brought a father back to his daughter, and set a mother on the path to redemption. But even as this chapter closed, new challenges awaited the Thompson family. The journey of healing, forgiveness, and building a new kind of family was just beginning, and the final part of their story was yet to be written. 1 year later, Emma's third birthday party filled Marcus's apartment with laughter and joy. Colorful balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and a princess-themed cake took center stage on the dining table. The birthday girl, wearing a sparkly purple dress, danced between her father and uncle, her curls bouncing with each movement. Sarah, who had successfully completed her counseling program, helped arrange cupcakes on a tray. Her supervised visitation requirement had been lifted 3 months ago, thanks to her unwavering commitment to therapy and her improved co-parenting relationship with Michael. Mommy, look what Uncle Marcus got me, Emma exclaimed, running to show Sarah a child-sized navy uniform, complete with tiny captain's bars. Now you can be just like your uncle, Sarah smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair. The gesture was natural, free from the tension that had marked their early supervised visits. Michael watched from the kitchen, where he was lighting birthday candles. The past year had transformed him from an undercover detective to a devoted father. He transferred to a desk job in the NYPD's intelligence division, ensuring he'd never have to disappear from Emma's life again. Marcus, now retired from active duty and working as a military consultant, had become the uncle who spoiled Emma endlessly. His apartment had slowly transformed into a family home, with toys scattered among his military memorabilia and Emma's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Time for cake, Michael announced, carrying the glowing creation to the table. As everyone gathered to sing Happy Birthday, Judge Henderson, who had become an unexpected family friend, arrived with a gift-wrapped package. "I hope I'm not too late," she smiled, setting her present on the growing pile. Emma blew out her candles while camera flashes lit up the room. Sarah caught Michael's eye across the table, and they shared a moment of peaceful understanding. Their journey hadn't been easy, but they'd found their way to a new normal. "What did you wish for, Princess?" Marcus asked his niece. Emma grinned, revealing a missing front tooth. "Can't tell, but it already came true. I got my whole family together." The adults exchanged emotional glances, each remembering the tumultuous path that had led them here. Sarah's attempted fraud, Michael's return, the court drama. It all seemed like a distant storm that had somehow cleared the air between them. Later that evening, as Emma played with her new toys, the adults sat on Marcus's balcony watching the sunset over Manhattan. "I never thought we'd end up here," Sarah admitted, sipping her coffee. "A year ago, I was facing jail time. Now," she gestured to the warm scene inside, where Emma was attempting to teach Judge Henderson a ballet move. Michael nodded. "Life has a funny way of working out. My undercover assignment nearly cost me everything, but it also led me back to my family." Speaking of family, Marcus interjected, "Rachel Martinez and I have been seeing each other." "Your attorney?" Sarah laughed. "Well, she did help bring this family together, in a way." The conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from inside. "Daddy, Uncle Marcus, Mommy, come see my dance." They all moved inside, where Emma performed an enthusiastic if wobbly pirouette in her new Navy uniform. Judge Henderson applauded from her seat, remembering the first time she'd seen this child in her courtroom, unaware of the drama surrounding her existence. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Emma fell asleep on the couch, still wearing her tiny uniform. Michael carried her to her bedroom. She stayed with him and Marcus 4 nights a week now, with Sarah having her the other 3. Sarah gathered her purse to leave, posing to kiss Emma goodnight. "See you on Wednesday for ballet class," she whispered. The brothers walked her to the door, their relationship with her now comfortable and respectful. They'd all learned valuable lessons about honesty, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. After Sarah left, Marcus and Michael stood in the quiet apartment, looking at the remnants of the party. "You know," Marcus said, "sometimes the best families are the ones we build ourselves, mistakes and all." Michael smiled, thinking of their journey from estranged twins to devoted brother and uncle. Who would have thought Sarah's scheme would give Emma exactly what she needed? All of us, together? As they cleaned up the party decorations, Emma's peaceful breathing could be heard from her room. The little girl who had unknowingly brought them all together slept soundly, surrounded by the love of her unconventional but devoted family. Their story had found its happy ending, though everyone knew it was really just the beginning of a new chapter.